Our son has recently been doing gross stuff to our daughter to get a rise out of her, and she really hates it. It started when she gagged when someone passed gas in a small room and he thought it was funny. And now he's periodically tried to fart in her face, hold the doggie bag up to her nose when walking the dog, and huffed in her face in the morning without brushing his teeth, causing her to gag a lot. He thinks it's funny, but she really hates it and wants him to stop. He knows this, and I've told him this after the first two incidents, but he still did it again. He says, I'm not hurting her. It's just a smell. It's funny, and she needs to get over it. In response, I told him, next time this happens, I'm going to make you smell something you won't be able to handle. And you're not going to stop smelling it just because you hate it or it makes you feel queasy. He asked, what could make me smell that's so bad? And I said, you don't want to find out. You don't give her any warning when you do these things, so you aren't receiving one either. I'm a vet tech, though, and have more than adequate means to follow through on this. He sort of rolled his eyes and said, whatever, but it did make him stop for a while. Until yesterday morning when he burped in her face again and laughed about it. I simply told him, all right, I'll be carrying out the punishment we discussed. I let my daughter take a mini vacation with my husband to get away from him in the meantime, to a local hotel and water park, while I prepare to administer his punishment. Just need a couple more dogs at work who need expressions. After talking with others about it, though, I just wonder if it's too harsh a punishment. My husband fully supports it, and so do 3 of my coworkers, but 2 of them say it's too harsh, and that a smell this bad is way disproportionate to burps and farts. I said that everyone has a different tolerance to these things, though, and if he repeatedly violates his sisters, then he needs to realize what it's like to be on the flip side of this. I told my husband I was having second thoughts and wondered if it was too harsh of a punishment, but he said, it's not undeserved and you have to follow through on your promise. Am I wrong? Top comments. Draining anal glands? You told him. He kept on. But make sure that it's not about retaliation. It's about doing as he told even when he thinks something is no big deal. Yes, siblings pick on each other. It should have been enough when his sister said stop. He didn't listen. It was more than enough when you as his parents told him to stop. He didn't listen. He doesn't set the rules in the house. You do. Once you giving him a nice whiff right in his face, make sure that he gets an actual punishment for his hard-headed behavior. He needs to lose some privileges for a week or 2, and he absolutely needs to apologize to his sister. I'd make him do her chores for a week since he wants to give her so much negative attention. He can show her love by being helpful and give her positive attention by doing her chores. You pointed out the biggest issue. It should have been enough when his sister said stop. Pranks and jokes that aren't explicitly violence are always written off as no big deal. But when a child grows up tying that to pleasure and joy and satisfaction, terrorizing and harassing, and making another person miserable and doing something again and again, even though the other person says no again and again, we're not doing them any favors by permitting that to continue, to let that compulsion keep building. Adolescents are impulsive. The job of parents is to help them learn how to control harmful or dangerous or antisocial impulses. This most definitely falls into that category, and I agree with you that being put in her shoes is fine, maybe even helpful, but what it will come down to is expressing why this is unacceptable and coming down against this behavior the same way OP would an actual violence. Because it's a real slippery slope here and needs nipped in the bud now. My older brother used to hit us a lot as kids. It stopped when my parents decided to hold him down and let us hit him one time. He never laid hands on us again. The punishment fits the crime. Nor. This was a last-ditch effort. He had already been talked to, warned, privileges taken, groundings, etc. This was the last thing my parents could think of to keep all of us younger siblings safe. He learned his lesson, and it never was an issue again. As someone with a brother, just do it. Mine was such a little crap, and he did gross and rude stuff to me. His favorite thing was to eat my leftovers. I hate leftovers, but when I had something I liked, he especially ate it. Or this one time, he ate all the Krispy Kreme donuts I had, because as he said, I shouldn't get any fatter. I wasn't fat in high school, I had abs. I never got back at him. Update 11 days later. Thanks to all who commented. It was pretty clear I had to follow through or wouldn't be respected, and that the punishment was fitting. Most people seem to agree except for the radical modern people for whom the concept of punishment seems totally alien to them as a concept. I talked to my daughter and husband on the phone one more time too, and she said, I for sure needed to follow through. There was a pug with a particularly funky gland expression at work that day too, so perhaps Providence was showing its agreement as well. Some were telling me to wake him up with it or stink up his room, but I didn't want the house to smell for ages. I just told my son to come to the backyard with me for his punishment, and that if he at any point resisted or refused, I'd have Dad come home to assist and the punishment would be 20 times longer. I made clear that was literal. He said, fine, let's get this over with, and followed me out. I showed him the jar. It had 12 dogs' expressions. Told him I was going to pop the lid and hold it to his nose, and he was going to take 3 sniffs. And that's what he did. It got a bigger reaction than even I expected. After the first sniff, his eyes widened and he was gagging, and he was holding his tummy afterwards, saying, "Oh my God, that is hideous." I told him, "It's just a smell. It's not harming you, right? Should I be able to do this as often as I want if I think it's funny, just like you do to your sister?" He said, Okay, I learned my lesson, I'll stop," and turned to go back inside, but I said, "Oh no, don't you remember what I said would happen if you did that to your sister again? You weren't going to stop smelling it just because you hated it, just like she wasn't." He looked back at me as if hoping I was joking, and I said, "Think about how your sister felt, knowing you were going to do this again and make her feel sick and be powerless to stop it." I then gave him a choice. He could put his nose over the rim for 3 minutes straight and get it over with right now, or he could come back outside with me every hour on the dot for another 2 sniffs until I decided the lesson had been learned. He agonized over the choice and said there was no way he could do 3 minutes, so chose the latter. Once per hour that day, we went back outside and it never seemed to get any easier for him. But after only the 4th time, I said, I think he's learned his lesson because I could see it was really getting to him. Didn't want anything overly harsh, but something very unpleasant, which I think was achieved. I told him that I think he's learned why these sorts of pranks aren't funny to people, and that if I ever heard of it happening again, he'd be spending a good long while with his nose in a jar like this or worse. I think he got the message. Daughter and husband came home from their mini vacation later that night, and there have been no incidents since. I think he got the message loud and clear. Comments. But I had made it clear that the sniffs had to be obvious and audible, and that the jar wasn't leaving his nose until I'd heard them. You are amazing, and I applaud you. Thank you for teaching this kid such an important lesson, and also for not letting him trample his sister's feelings to be at peace without consequences. I just wanted to say thank you. Some parents won't really follow through with punishment for lots of reasons. I'm proud you stood up for your daughter and honestly believe that lessons like this will be so much better for him in the end, as well as anyone he interacts with through life. Somebody said, love how she made him keep at it after he said he got it. The issue isn't just some smells are bad. The issue is the bullying and lack of power his sister has to resist. He didn't stop when his sister asked. Hopefully he doesn't just pivot to another way of harassing his sister, who is unable to fight him off and has to keep living in the same house. A commenter, there are lessons that kids sometimes just will not learn until you take a more drastic approach. Recently, our 4-year-old starting tormenting the cat, despite screeching at us that she loves him. So we took the cat out of the equation when she once again threw a toy at him. As in, we put him in the study with treats for a few hours of peace and quiet. And she was not allowed to play with him, cuddle him, help us feed him at all night. There were several meltdowns in the beginning, but the lesson got through to her, and since then, she has been so gentle with Tiger that he no longer bolts as soon as he sees her. It's all about consequences of their actions, but in direct relation to the action. Taking the iPad away when they're tormenting their sibling does nothing. It's not the iPad that's the problem. Taking the cat away from our daughter taught her that we meant what we said and helped her understand exactly what was wrong with her behavior.
For context, I am currently a college freshman. I am on a full ride to my university. Every semester, I get a check sent to my house to pay off my housing costs, which is about $9,000. My unemployed father got evicted from my old address because he wasn't paying rent, so my family started living in a hotel. I was questioning how they were paying for the hotel, considering it was $150 a night. Turns out, my father used my college check to cash out and pay for the hotel for 2 months. I begged him to pay off my college housing costs for 2 months straight. He lied to me, telling me that it was attached to some funds, which were hard to get out. Very confusing, but keep in mind I have absolutely zero financial literacy, and my father never went into depth. I brushed it off, hoping that everything would work for the best. My college housing gave my father a deadline to pay off housing costs, November 1st. I was stressed for 2 months, unable to eat well, sleep, socialize, etc. If my dad doesn't pay it off, I may or may not have to drop out. When the deadline hit, I called my dad and asked him why he hadn't paid off my housing costs. He finally revealed that he used the check on the hotel we were living in. I was furious, and I started interrogating him like a prosecutor. He blamed the family for being responsible for using my college money, not himself, and also blamed me. He lent me allowance money for 2 months, telling me that it was from my relatives when it was actually from my $9,000 housing check. I asked him why he would do this, and he said that he didn't want to stress me out. I cried telling him I worked way too hard in high school for me to drop out. I said that he owed me an apology 3 times over the phone, but he refused because he thought he had done nothing wrong since he was providing for the family. I asked him again, and he said sorry in a mocking voice. I told him that he was full of crap, and he started saying that he wants to put a gun to his head and end himself, and it will all be on me. This is not the first time he has done that. I told him to do it, and I hung up. My mom called me, and I informed her about the situation. She told me to apologize to my dad, and I told her, as psychotic as I may sound, I have no remorse, especially after what he did. My mom threatened to disown me, but I somehow mended things with them for 3 weeks. It is currently Thanksgiving break, and my father still didn't pay off my check, and he said that he would get money Saturday to pay it off. My mom told me again to apologize to him after he paid my housing costs, and I said I would avoid conflict. But I think I'm way too stubborn to apologize, especially because I genuinely think I have nothing to be sorry for. My dad never fully apologized and made a joke out of me to the family. Some relevant comments. Comment 1. Whose name was on the check? Sounds like fraud to me if your name is on that check. Original poster. I'm honestly not sure because I never physically saw the check. All I knew was that it was mailed to my old address, and my neighbor gave the check to my father, who proceeded to cash it out. Comment 2. Your father stole your mail and somehow cashed the check. That sounds like a federal crime to me. Get an appointment with student accounts at your university and explain what happened. Your school may have emergency bursaries or loans that will help out. Either way, ask them to send your mail somewhere safer. Can you get a post office box affordably, or ask them to hold the check for you to pick it up? Open an account on your own with neither parent as co-account holder. I'm sorry this is happening to you. Original poster. I would love to, but there's also a huge part that I left out regarding this situation. My mother is an illegal immigrant, and if my dad goes to jail or gets charged, then she would have to go back to her country. I did threaten my dad with this, but my mother said that she would flat out disown me if I did. I also have little siblings too, so I would not like for them to have to take the fall for this. I think I will contact the school and ask them to put the mail somewhere safer, probably my dorm address. Is your dad unemployed because he can't find a job or because he doesn't feel like working? Either way, stealing educational funds from his child isn't providing for the family. Definitely talk to someone with the school and change where that check is sent. It is on your parents to provide for their family, not on you, and definitely not on the school. Original poster. He's been unemployed for over 25 years, and it's basically because he doesn't want to work. He has been leeching money from other people all my life. If your dad is legal, but your mom is an illegal immigrant, then they must not be married. Usually, the act of him marrying her would make her a citizen by marriage. So, did they never get married? If he wants to avoid her getting deported, he should marry her. That's on them, not you. Sounds like your dad abuses everyone he is with. Original poster. They never got married for some reason. I think it's his way to keep her wrapped around his finger. Update. 3 months later, first and foremost, immediately after this happened, I managed to get a separate debit card without my parents knowing. I don't have a job now, but I'm looking to get one later on in the semester. I didn't go to the financial aid center because my dad somehow managed to pay me back. I'm going under the assumption that it's through my grandmother's Social Security checks. Last December, after weeks of calling my father to make up for my scholarship money and pay me back, he finally sent me a check for $9,000. The check came in my dorm mail around midnight. I was asleep by then, and my dad was spam calling my phone to tell me it was in the mail. I didn't call him back until 1 in the afternoon because I had an exam that day. He started cursing at me, telling me how he couldn't sleep all night because I didn't answer my phone. I talked back and said, "The stress you put me through for 3 months by lying about my scholarship check is nothing compared to the stress you went through for a day." He started insulting me in every way possible, telling me that I was spoiled. I swore back, saying, "Are you freaking serious?" and he hung up. Moments later, my dad made my mom call me because he didn't want to argue with me. She screamed at me saying that I should always have respect for him as a father and that I should apologize for swearing. I said that yes, I did swear at him, but he did too, calling me a bunch of slurs and whatnot. She also accused me of purposely ignoring them when I made it clear several times that I was asleep and I had an exam at 9 in the morning, hence not calling them at midnight. I told her that we shouldn't even have this talk because he was clearly in the wrong in this entire situation, and every other kid would have gone to the financial aid center, and my dad would have gotten in trouble. My mom misunderstood me for saying that I was going to report my dad. She had a mental breakdown and hung up. Moments later, my dad called and told me to go ahead and report him because I would be going to jail instead of him because he sent me some of the money from the check, which is holy crap. I called him out on his crap, and he said that he was permanently severing ties so I could learn my lesson. He hung up. I didn't call them for a week until I realized that I didn't have a place to stay for winter break. My dorm closed. I swallowed my pride and called them back to apologize. They said they'll accept me back to the family. This honestly still keeps me up at night, but I literally didn't have a choice but to stay with them over break. Over break, they've noticed that I'm way more cold and distant towards them, and they still wonder why. Luckily, I got the $9,000 check from my university to pay for this semester's housing fees. The best thing that came out of this is that I ended up reconnecting with my estranged sister, 25 years old. Long story short, my father financially abused my sister for years, maxing out her credit cards and leaving her $2,000 in debt. They cut all ties a year ago after my sister started dating a guy they didn't approve of. When I was on good terms with them, they painted her as the bad guy, telling me that she betrayed them by choosing her boyfriend over the entire family. I also didn't know that my dad financially abused her. Turns out she was in the same situation I was in and ended up dropping out because my dad didn't let her take out a student loan. I talked to my sister, and she said that she was honestly glad that she severed ties with them because she's finally financially independent, even if she's not financially stable. We're closer than ever, and I probably consider her as a shoulder to lean on. Mentally, I'm really not doing well. I'm generally stoic, but this is taking a hard emotional toll on me because my family was my world. Before college, I always knew my father was insane, but my mother was my ride or die. I told her everything. I helped her through her marital problems. She told me everything. And the fact that she chose my abusive, unemployed father, the man that she always talked about wanting to divorce, over her daughter, is heartbreaking. She still expects me to be her armchair therapist, and she told me she wants me to act like how I did before. I told her over break that no matter what she does, she will never mend back the trust I had for her then. And my father, despite his flaws, I never expected him to use my check. He put such a huge emphasis on education and told me he wanted me to have the life he never had. And knowing he would sacrifice my education just so he could live in a fancy $150 hotel is very disheartening. Recently, I've been very isolated. I still talk to a few people, my grades are falling, and I haven't been eating or sleeping well. Maybe this situation should be a wake-up call for me, but I've come to the point where I'm completely apathetic about everything. I refrain from drugs, thankfully, but even so, I feel like my life is on autopilot. Here are some relevant comments. Lock your credit. Get a post office box. Make sure you have your legal documents. Original poster. If my dad gives me my legal documents. New update, 7.5 months later. As you may or may not know, I made 2 posts several months ago about my father using up my college money. I also want to clear up some confusion. My parents are religiously married through the Catholic Church in another country, but they never got legally married because my dad doesn't want my mother to get a green card. And yes, in some colleges like mine, the broken education system in America still uses checks, but most people use direct deposit. I am glad to say that he no longer has access to my finances, and I am in low contact with them. Thanks to the advice of this subreddit, I got my social security card and other documents months before I left for college. I also managed to get my first job. I distanced myself from my parents, and I took a lot of time to reflect on them and their actions. They also distanced themselves from me after I finally put my foot down and refused to give them financial assistance. They said that I was self-absorbed, and once again, my father told me he would end himself if I didn't help him. And this time, instead of telling him to off himself, I told him that's a decision he would make, and I can't be responsible for it. I realized, no matter what I do, they'll never change. They will always be the type of people to financially leech off of others, using their self-harm threats and weaponizing self-pity, but they're too emotionally stunted to see the faults of that. Their psyche is so twisted, and I spent a lot of time mourning for the parents I never had. They were never meant to be parents. But they're also people. Sometimes people like them exist. As for my mother, she completely turned her back on me and said that I was a TV villain for not giving my father the money he deserved for raising me and my siblings. I told her he was never emotionally present as a father, and neither was she, not just from the self-harm threats, but also by being a threat to our well-being. She used to treat me as a friend and therapist, but rarely as a daughter. She used me to complain about the emotional and mental abuse my dad inflicted on her. But at the same time, she was also the person to turn her back on me in a blink of an eye, if it meant protecting my father's feelings and making him happy. Sometimes, she went as far as to attack me or my siblings if we did anything to make him cross. I guess I still have a lot of pity for her, considering that she is an illegal immigrant in an abusive situation. But it doesn't outweigh the damage. It was impossible to communicate with her since he was her own little world. I don't think she really loved me or saw me as a person or a child, just an outlet for her emotional dysfunction. Recently, my mother called me and lied about my dad being ill so they could take a couple of bucks from me again. I told them to find their own source of money and hung up. I check up on my little brothers every now and then. They're currently still living in the hotel. While their physical safety isn't harmed, I still struggle with the guilt of leaving them behind, and I'm unclear on what the future holds for them. This past year, I learned what it meant to be independent, not just financially, but to be free from the mental control of them and making those decisions for myself. Needless to say, I'm happier. I'm surrounded with good and caring people. My grades aren't great, but better, and I'm finally in a good place right now. In the end, everything's going to be all right. And even if it's not the end.